So, I've been messing around with bees since 2010. And whoops. Oh yeah. And based on that experience, I would say what I'm going to find in here is a cluster of bees right smack in the middle of this hive. And I added 2 hunks of this pollen fondant concoction thing that I came up with. I would guess that those are going to be completely consumed. I say that judging from what I've seen in this hive since I last added these fondant, pollen-infused fondant bricks, or whatever you want to call them, which was probably 2 weeks ago. Just the bees have been active. They've been really working it. They've come to life, and I just think that just from the way I've been watching them fly and come and go and do their thing, they're stimulated. They're excited, and they get excited when you give them real pollen, natural resources, not pollen substitute or anything like that. This is real pollen that's been ground into a powder and mixed with some fondant. My guess is this colony too, it's been struggling, and as long as their queen is alive, they should be okay. And this fondant and pollen will give them a boost. But the trick, oh, they're flying. You can't see them off camera, but they're flying, coming out of the bottom entrance bit. The only issue with feeding is once you start feeding, especially pollen, you got to keep an eye on them, because they're going to just, if they're healthy and the queen is ready to lay, they're going to consume that pollen. And it's going to go so fast, it's scary how quickly they'll go through that pollen. And if they start doing that, then they're going to start, the queen is going to start laying eggs. They're going to start rearing brood. And you'll have a lot more mouths to feed, and all their honey and everything is just going to burn through it really quick. So you got to stay on top of it as soon as you start feeding them. That's why I have this hive next to my house. I have another hive and other hives further away that I can't check on every day, and I'm not feeding them because it's just, I might not be able to stay on top of it if the population explodes. But these guys I can. So that's what I think I'm going to find. I think I'm going to find just a cluster of bees right here, and these 2 pollen infused fondant bricks that I gave them are going to be gone. So I'm going to just try to slip it in. And I have no protection, no veil, no nothing. Okay, so all the pollen is gone as expected, and that, yeah, looks good. So I don't know if I think my camera stopped recording for some reason. Just to show you what I did, be very quick. I gave them 2 more pollen infused hunks of fondant, and they're building comb, a little bit of comb above, some dirty comb above the top bars. Anyway, that's it. So I'll check them again probably in 10 days. And again, the trick with feeding protein, especially in late winter or early spring, which is still early spring here, if the queen is healthy, then they'll convert that protein, the pollen, into all the things they need to do to make royal jelly. And royal jelly is the main ingredient for baby bees, along with pollen and other things, a mixture of other enzymes. But without the pollen, it's the critical piece of the puzzle. Now they've got that critical piece of the puzzle to make, mother's milk, basically, and off they go. So again, it's a small colony. I'm not sure about the queen. I'm not sure if she's a well-mated queen or anything. It's a tricky situation I won't get into, but basically it's not the strongest colony in the world, but it might have a viable, healthy, robust queen. And if they do, she'll react to that pollen and start laying. And I suspect she's already laying, but it's just too cold to do any kind of full hive inspections or anything like that. They've gone through some trauma with that already this year, with me completely opening the hive and putting them into this smaller hive. So I don't want to double down on that. That just makes even more stressful defensive bees, at least in my experience. So here you go. That's what I did today. There's nothing standard about any of this. These are 2, I mean, if I explain everything, it's just, none of it is standard. So it's a 5-frame box. The bottom box is a deep, but with 5 medium frames. Then the next box is 5 medium frames, and that's where the bees are, and where most of the honey is. Then they've got this maybe 1.5-inch rim that's mostly hard insulation on top of it to give room for the protein patties or blocks or whatever it is I gave them, whatever you want to call it. The only problem with adding a feeder rim, which is what that thing is down there, is that it gives some space, it adds extra space above the top bars, and the bees, if they're really cooking and it's warm, they're just going to want to fill that space in with comb. And they will eventually do that, and these bees are just starting to do that. But right now I'd rather make sure they get food and not worry about a little bit of messy comb, so that's what I'm doing. But sometimes that happens. You feed the bees in late winter, early spring with a frame feeder, and then when you finally get to do a first full hive inspection, it's all full of, all that extra space is full of comb, so you gotta keep an eye on that. So anyway, that's what I've got here. There's insulation on top of that feeder rim, and then I got 2 pieces of really super thick hard insulation, providing probably about an R20, 30, maybe, yeah, at least R20 value of insulation protection, whatever you call it. And but this is the standard size from a standard hive, so it's just hanging there on the top. Then I've got this boulder that weighs about 50 pounds sitting on top of it to weigh it down. Now I got another one, and I can just tell by the way these bees are flying around that they're in good shape. I don't know how I can tell, but sick bees are they're almost stupid. Like I can see a few bees over here crawling in the snow, but even by the way they're crawling in the snow, I can see that they're okay. They're gonna just like suck up some water out of that. Now it's on the grass. They're not dead, right? You can tell when they're sometimes they go in the snow and you can just see right away that they're gonna die. They just curl up and die. I think this insulation is doing the trick, especially the top insulation. There's no top ventilation, so all that heat, they're not losing any heat anywhere. It's all going up and staying up. And so there's nothing conventional about this setup or anything that I'm doing here. But you know, once you've been around the block a bit, you know what you can get away with. And I know this is gonna, this looks, well, I know this is gonna be fine. These bees, as long as that queen is in good shape, they're just gonna go crazy. I don't know how big the cluster will get. We'll see how it goes. It really depends on the queen and how much pollen and natural resources they bring in once the weather improves. But it will likely be another month, at least another month, before they're really bringing in significant amount of pollen and nectar. So anyhow, they're gonna get fed. I'll check them probably every 10 days, at least every 2 weeks. That's what you got to do, I'd say. At least every 2 weeks once you start feeding pollen, until they can take care of themselves, until enough natural resources are coming in for themselves to do their thing. You'll notice too that when you're feeding pollen, especially pollen supplement, not necessarily, like this is real 100% pollen that the bees gathered themselves, so they're going to gobble that up no matter what, I would say. But if you buy commercial pollen supplements or substitutes, sometimes they call them pollen patties, but if you look at the ingredients, there's no actual pollen in it. It's got certain various types of plant protein and other types of protein, but not actual pollen. And so when the bees are hungry for it, like right now, they'll suck it up and they'll eat up those pollen patties, or those pollen substitute patties. But as soon as the real thing starts showing up in their natural environment, they just ignore them. They just say, okay, well, we've got real pollen now. We're not going to make do with this pollen substitute, and they just ignore the patties. So you'll know. Anyway, these guys are looking good. I'll probably have to feed them one more time, at least one more time, before they're okay to make do on their own. But yeah, so far so good.